Luckily for me as well, one of my really good dive buddies is listening in, Tony. So he can correct me if I go wrong at any point, which will be good to have some backup. Okay, so this is just an introduction to South Coast Nudibranch. There's lots of species I haven't seen. There'll be some that Tony's seen that I haven't seen, and there's some that I've seen in Dorset or Cornwall, which I haven't added onto this because obviously we're talking about South Devon. So just a little introduction, as Mike was already saying, I've been diving since 2003. I actually started diving in Egypt. That's where I did my first course, which was somewhat easier than the conditions that you get in England. Lots and lots and lots of local diving, especially around Torbay. I'm always in somewhere at weekends, and obviously when the weather gets better and things, we get in there after work as well sometimes, which is nice to relax after work. But also dive around the South Ham, so around Hope Cove and Thurleston, that area, and Haybrook Bay, and then round towards Wembury and Plymouth as well. So lots and lots of dives along the coast. In fact, with Tony, I went in and the other way and went to Budleigh for the first time last weekend. So yeah, we're always trying to get in at new places and see what there is there as well. As aforementioned, I've dived in Cornwall and Dorset too, and then lots of diving abroad. So I first really got into Nudibranchs whilst I was abroad. I went traveling for a year between 2007 and 2008 and pretty much plotted my route around the world on where I wanted to dive, basically. So listened and talked to a lot of people and plotted it, and I think that year I might have done something crazy, like about 200 dives. And it was abroad, you see Nudibranchs all the time. And then when I got back here, just started really getting into them here, and was really surprised about how many you can see here. Like, I really had no idea before that there were so many different species. So started trying to find them because I got a bit obsessed with them whilst I was abroad. And it was great trying to find them here. Obviously, the conditions being a lot harder, it's really quite joyous when you find something. So yeah. So there's three main branches of Nudibranch. So the Dorids, over there on the left-hand side of your screen, they're the largest group that there are. They've got like oval flattened bodies, like the foot is underneath the mantle over the top, and the gill is normally towards the back of them. So you can see sometimes when you see them, it's like this little like branches that come out towards the back of them, which are the gills. And they feed on sponges and bryozoans. I've got just with me as well, just to let you know, Jim Anderson and Bernard Picton have done a book that's on Kindle, and I've just got that on my phone as well, just to refer back to if there's anything that I need to. But I've done a slide at the end that has got some references on it. Then we've got the Claddagh so to be honest, I'm really terrible at trying to pronounce all of these names. So it's probably easier that you read them rather than trying to listen to me pronounce all of the names. So they tend to have a more flattened body, and the gills are below the mantle. And you can see there's more on the top of them. So they're a little bit more busy on the top. They also have a flattened body, and they eat cnidarians, so things like hydroids. So quite often with some of the nudibranchs, they're so small, it's good to know what they eat, as if you can see what they eat an awful lot easier than you can see the actual nudibranchs. So it does help to try and locate them if you are familiar with what they eat and find those first. And then the third group, sorry, I've just got to move the zoom out the way a little bit. The Nudibranch, so they're long and slim. They've got sensory projections on the head, so they've got these bits that come out, what would I guess be their chin. So they've got the bits that come out here, and the bits that are on the back are called serrata. And that's what you can see on the photograph there on the top of the nudibranch. And they also eat hydroids, anemones, and corals as well. So what I've done is on the slides, I've gone through each of the 3 different groups here, and then I've just put some of the photos of some of the ones that I've seen on there. Okay, so starting with the Dorids. So the first pictures you can see on here are these more commonly known as a sea lemon, which you would probably hear more often. They can get quite big, so they can get up to 120 millimeters, so 12 centimeters long. So obviously they are pretty massive in terms of a nudibranch, as a lot of them are just so small. And they're quite common to see. You see those quite often. You might also sometimes see some of their eggs, which are like a rosette, or like, I don't know, like a rose if you're looking at it from the top. And you see those quite often as well. They're pretty big. There are some species of nudibranchs that eat those eggs. So sometimes if you find those eggs, you can see nudibranchs in them as well. I know that Tony found one of those actually down in Cornwall once when we were diving there, and there were 3 different nudibranchs inside the spiral of eggs eating them. And then next to that one, I've lost my mouse, sorry. We've got this Rostanga rubra, this little orange one. Now they can get to about 15 millimeters, so they're somewhat smaller. So more Dorids. So you can see in the bottom left-hand corner the Gitadoris Planata. So to be honest, it looks almost exactly the same as the sea lemon. But when you look at it, you can see where I put the arrows. They have these white splotches on them. Really technical term there. Splotches. And you can see where I put the arrows. They're these white acidic splotches. And that is a good way of being able to tell the difference between that and a sea lemon. And then next to that, you've got the Geruna tomentosa. So these are quite common. We tend to see an awful lot of these. They've got very similar looking eggs and a big spiral rosette as well. These were both taken at Beacon Cove in Torquay, and the one in the bottom left-hand corner, that was over in Sholston near Brixham. Now, over in Sholston, actually, it's a really good spot for rock pooling if any of you live over that way. I can remember going on a year 6 with school trip to, I can't remember what the name of the place is, but one of the activities that we did was we went over to Sholston at low tide and went rock pooling. And obviously with the children scooping up bits and bobs in their nets, I was really surprised at how many different nudibranchs that they were. I mean, they were really small, but there were so many of them in the rock pools. It was quite, I was very, very surprised, got very excited over that. Okay, so on the left-hand side, now I've only ever seen this species of nudibranch twice. Once was down in Cornwall, and this one was at Watcombe on the north side of Torquay, when it was a boat dive. But I don't know if that is because they're not very common or because they are just impossible to see because they're so well camouflaged. As you can see in the picture, that's not quite such a close-up. But incredibly pretty underneath all of that. They've got these really iridescent blue spots, but they normally only grow to between 10 and 20 millimeters. So they're really quite small, as well as being incredibly well camouflaged. And then on the right-hand side, that was taken at Meadfoot in Torquay. So the 2 species look incredibly similar. So one of them is more commonly known as the fried egg sea slug, the one with the red patch down the middle. And then the other one basically doesn't have the red patch down the middle, but looks exactly the same. They are quite small. So the ones I've normally seen are only about 10 millimeters long. Okay, so we're still on the Dorids. So on the left-hand side, I've never been quite certain how to pronounce that at the bottom there. I've just remembered the spelling of it. That those two are mating. That was taken at Meadfoot as well. And then in the middle there, you can see some of them laying eggs. And you can see quite often you can get some of these eggs on the very end of blades of seagrass. Now this species, the Polysarah Quadrilineata, this has just been split into two different species. So the one that at the bottom, which has got the kind of more yellowish dots on it that basically form 4 lines, that one, and then the one above where you can see that they've got more black dots on it, that one's just been split into 2 groups. So I'll just find out, just let you know what that is. I should have put it on the slide. I've taken a photo of somebody from Northeast Nudibranchs drawings of them to help me to be able to tell the difference in terms of a reference. Oh no, it's gone. So it's got it basically where it says Quadrilineata, it looks like it should say Norway, but it doesn't quite say that. I don't know if Tony, you know what that one's called or not. But that one hasn't been put onto any of the reference sites yet. I think everyone's just trying to get their head around which one's which. And then we've got the Primora papillata over on the right. So again, you can see it laying eggs. They've got like orangey eggs in a spiral. They're quite small, normally between 10 and 20 millimeters. These were all taken at Meadfoot, which actually Mike said that he was there today at Meadfoot. So these were all taken there. I don't tend to see these in many places. I tend to only see them at Meadfoot, and then in Brixton Breakwater, going towards Ladybird Cove, there's a rock there, and I see them there. I don't tend to see them anywhere else. They're the only 2 spots where they seem to be really, really prevalent. I'm not quite sure why that is. And then this bottom one down here, which is known as the orange clubbed sea slug as a generic name. Those ones are really, really, really common. Like you see those absolutely everywhere. Okay, so still on the Dorids. So the Gitadoris Melata that you can see there with all the eggs, I haven't seen those since 2013. So those photos are from 2013 and they're from Babacombe. And just that, whatever, I think it was just towards the summer, there were hundreds of them everywhere. Like just out on the silty bit, there were just loads and loads and loads of them, absolutely everywhere, laying eggs. You can see them in big clumps and you can see what all of the eggs look like. And I've never seen them anywhere else. It was just that one year. So I'm not quite sure what was happening that year for that to happen either. Then over in the bottom left-hand corner, I hadn't seen those anywhere but Cornwall, but last year went for a dive around the Dartmouth Mewstone, and there were loads of them there around the Dartmouth Mewstone. It was nice to go and do a bit of a different coastline. And then the one in the bottom right corner, that one was taken at Oddicombe, opposite Babacombe in Torquay. So I've never seen that one anywhere else apart from there either. I've only seen that one once. Okay, now these 2 absolutely minute ones on the left over here, they were floating in the water column, which is why they ended up on my glove. Because as I say, normally I wouldn't move them, touch them, nothing. But they just happen to be floating, and you just sort of catch them in your eye as you're going along. So the Ancula gibbosa was in that one was in Beacon, and that was this year, Beacon Cove in Torquay. And then the one just next to it, that was over in Sholston, over in Brixham again. And both of them were just tiny. They were about 3 millimeters long, those 2, but they do get to be a little bit bigger than that. As I say, I just happened to notice them as they were floating in the water. Then the Trepanias. So again, both of those, they can be quite small, but I have seen them between 10, 20 millimeters is probably the most common amount of sizes I've seen them. Seen both of those at Babbacombe, seen them at Meadfoot, seen them over in Brixham, so seen those more. I've tended to see the Maculata more, the one with the yellow bits on it, rather than the Polida. And then over in the bottom corner there, the Ocenia elegans, that is my favourite sea slug in this country. They can actually be quite big. So they can get to be 30 millimeters sometimes. So they can actually be quite huge. But both one of those was taken in Brixham and the other one was taken in Beacon Cove in Torquay again. Sorry, I keep having to move my little zoom bit around so I can see all the different things. So these ones here I've done as a separate slide because these are quite unusual. The one on the left, the first time I saw that one, and I got it ID'd by Bernard Picton on the North East Atlantic Nudibranch page that Mike was talking about. And Bernard just said, it's not supposed to be here. So it's quite an unusual one to see, but I have now seen that in Babbacombe and I have seen it in Meadfoot. It tends to be a little way out, I guess I've seen them, but that's not to say that they won't wash up at any point. The ones in the middle, now I've only put those on because I saw those in Plymouth and it was out by the Eddystone Lighthouse. So we're talking way out on a boat. But the fact that they've been out there way out on a boat doesn't mean that they won't at some point come in a lot closer. So those ones, although really, really popular around Portugal, are really, really unpopular over in England. So although the channel's really small, and they're kind of up that coastline, Portugal, France, and they're quite common there, really not common over here at all. So I don't know if that's, I mean, my guess would be it's because the water's warming up. And so they've kind of come over here as well, but that would be a good one to keep your eye out for if you happen to be down in Plymouth. And then same with this one here on the right, another Trepania. So that one I've only seen in Babbacombe once, and I've only seen in Oddicombe once. And both of them have been within the last 5 years, but again, not a species that we're meant to have over here. Okay, so on to the next group, the Nudibranch. So now this one's just changed its name. So I didn't realise that so where I've put it in bold, down at with all the names there, I didn't realise that had changed until I went onto Bernard Picton's website, which I will mention at the end, where I realised that it wasn't now called Tritonia, which is what it was before, and it's just changed to whatever that says there. So the one in the bottom, the left-hand corner, which I've put a circle around because it's quite hard to see, they basically live on dead men's fingers, and that's a juvenile one. So it's really, as you can see, really, really well camouflaged with the dead man's fingers. The lineata, you can see there in the middle, you can see the eggs that they're laying at the moment. That was taken at London Arch. So if you go to Beacon and basically turn left, you'll be able to see, you can see an arch there before you get to Meadfoot. So it's kind of between Beacon and Meadfoot. And that was taken there. But those ones are quite common. You see quite a lot of those. They tend to be around 10 millimeters big. So those ones you may come across if you're rock pooling on the shore. The next one along, as you can see again, is really, really well camouflaged, and it lives on the hard coral that we have here, the pink sea fans. And as you can see, it looks exactly like one of the branches of the pink sea fan, basically. Probably less likely to try and find those when you're rock pooling and things, because they do tend to just be on the pink sea fans, and pink sea fans only tend to be in certain places as well, tend to be a little bit deeper. Although there are pink sea fans at Blackhead Rock. So if you go to Anstey's Cove in Torquay and go out and round to the right, which is where Blackhead Rocks are, There's a lot of pink sea fans there, and I've seen those nudibranch there, so that's not too far out. And then the one on the end, I've seen those at, that was at Oddicombe, that one. Okay, so the Hankokia. Now, when I first found one of those, they're quite rare. And again, when I was on Northeast Atlantic Nudibranchs and I was trying to get an ID, because it was something new, as these are the only two of these I've ever seen. I got told that they were supposed to be red. Now, as you can see here in the pictures, they're not red at all. But they apparently it's normally red because that's the color of what they live on. And these two I found on seagrass, so they weren't really supposed to be there. And as you can see, yes, I've got a light pink one and a green one. But one of them was over in Brixham, and actually it was really shallow. I think it only really just got in the water, so it was only about 3 meters deep when I saw the pinkish coloured one. That was the first one that I saw. And then the green one was over at Beacon Cove in Torquay. So again, very local. They can grow to be about, I think they were about 20 millimeters long. Then the Antiopella cristata, that has also just had a name change. So it was the Genola cristatus, and it's just had a name change. But I mean, they're absolutely beautiful. They can be quite big. You know, you can sometimes see those about 30 millimeters long. And you see those all over the place. Out of the dives that I've done this year, I've seen a lot of those. Which is quite nice. So those ones you might find in rock pools and out in the shallows and things if you snorkel and stuff. Okay, now Dottos. I am what I can only describe as really quite hopeless at IDing these. On Bernard Picton's website, there are 12 different species of Dotto, because I went on there and counted them up. And to be honest, about 7 of them all look exactly the same to me. So some of them have got 5. When you look on the back of them, you can see how similar they look. And they've got these quite bulbous serrata on the back of them. And some species have got 5 of those on each side. Some have got 6, and some of them have got 7, and some of them can be a slightly different color. And I just find them absolutely impossible to try to ID. I think Tony's better at IDing these than me. So some of them are quite distinctive. So the cuspidata is nearly always black. So that one is quite distinctive. The fragilis, I always think looks like a cauliflower. So that one is also quite distinctive. And then the pinnapedrata, the one at the bottom right, I also find that one a little bit easier to ID as well. But as for the rest, I really, really do get confused. I did speak to Terry Griffiths recently, who's also done a Nudibranchs of the Southwest book, asking him to try to explain to me the differences between all of these. And he sort of laughed at me and then said the difference can be something as small as a tiny comma or something somewhere on the animal. And obviously, if you can't see that bit, then it makes it really difficult to ID them. A good thing to do with some of these is you do find them on the things that they eat, so the specific hydroid that they eat. So you can see on 3 of the pictures, the Deni, the fragilis, and the pinnapedrata, you can see that they're all on a hydroid. And the good thing about the Bernard Picton's website is that there are some links that will tell you exactly the type of hydroid that you might see them on. But these are quite small, so you know, like 10 millimeters up to about 15 millimeters. So they might be difficult to spot, basically. But yeah, you get them all over Torbay. So one of them was Brixham, one of them was Plymouth. The cuspidata was down in Plymouth. And then around Torbay, you see them quite often. With these, I always look for the hydroid first and then find the nudibranch second. Okay, so on to this next group of nudibranch here. So the one in the bottom, the left-hand side there, it's really, really white. That's apparently really unusual for it to not really have any colour to it. That was taken in Babacum. I think it's called the common, I can't say that word up there, the common one, and I thought it can't be that common because I've only ever seen one of them, and that's the only one that I've seen. And then the one next to it, that was actually taken on a sea search dive, and that was over at Hope's Nose, so where all the fishermen like going in Torquay. Just around from that, there's a cove again called Hope Cove, and that one was taken there whilst doing some seagrass surveying, and that one I've only ever seen once as well. The one next to that, now they've only been spotted in our waters in the last 3 or 4 years. I think Terry Griffiths was the first person who reported them, and they seem to be really prevalent now. Like they were quite rare to start off with, but they just seem to be all over the place. So that was taken at Meadfoot, the bottom one, and then the one in the right-hand corner, that one was taken, I think actually they were both Meadfoot. Oh, I have seen one at Babacum, and I did see one in Dartmouth last year as well. So their range seems to have broadened in the time that they've been here. Okay, then we've got the Flabilinas auriculata. Now they're really, really common. At the moment, they are absolutely all over the place. So every dive, not that I've done very much diving this year because the conditions haven't been great, but see lots of those on every dive. So I think about 2 weeks ago in my school Easter holiday, was diving round at Beacon, and my buddy Emma and I came across a patch, and there just must have been 30, 40 of them, just all around the back of the millstones, which you can see when you look out of Beacon. Just loads and loads and loads of them. And then the Bostonensis, which looks relatively similar, but slightly different. They tend to have a bit of a purple hue on the front of them, a purpley bluey hue. That one was taken at Brixham. They can get quite big, so they can be 20 millimeters. I say big, and then I say 20 millimeters, which is only about that big, which is not big at all. But in terms of nudibranchs, they're quite big. So yeah, you can get them sort of 20 millimeters, sometimes a little bit more, 25 millimeters, things like that. And then over onto the right, the Flabilinas. So they've got the different species. These ones are quite easy to ID because if you look at their rhinophores, which are the bits that come out of the head here, they're quite bulbous, so they kind of go up a bit and then have a lump, and then up a bit and have a lump, and they kind of that shape. So those ones are quite easy to ID due to that. Again, these ones were taken at Beacon and Babacum, but again, I've seen them over in Brixham quite a lot as well. I'm just gonna have a drink of squash. Sorry. Okay, then the Flabilinas. So the brownie, which the serrata, so the spiky bits on the top, they can be quite red in colour as well, a little bit like the lineata. The difference between the two literally being the lineata has got lines going down the body. I don't know if you can see in the photo, but on the left hand side one, you can see a little bit of white line going down the body. So they were taken at Babacum and Beacon Cove. those ones. Then the Edmondsella pedata beside those, this lovely pinky purpley coloured sea slugs. The one at the top there you can see is laying eggs. And then actually there's I don't know if you can you see my mouse? I'm not sure. There's a small one there as well, and then this one's laying eggs, which looks a bit like spaghetti all over the place. And there's a couple there as well. So you see those quite often. Those ones are quite common. You see those quite often everywhere. And now this is another category of nudibranch that have just had lots of name changes, basically. So all of these were called Ubrancus until recently, where obviously as research happens and genes are looked at and everything like that, and they can subcategorize them into different species again. So if they've had quite a lot of name changes. So the Ubrancus dori, which is still which is now called the Capillinea fustifera, is absolutely tiny. So we're talking about that one was approximately, I don't know, 3 millimeters long. I think it just comes down to looking at the right piece of fluff underwater and seeing it moving, and then realizing it's not just background, it's not fluff, it's something else. The Vitatus, that one was over in Meadfoot. I've not seen that one very often at all. And then so I've just got to move my, that's it, I've just got to move my Zoom thing again. So the Exiguus, if that's how you pronounce it, that is the first time I've seen one of those, and that was at Beacon 2 weeks ago. And that one is minute. It was about 2 millimeters long. I only happened to see it because it's a light color against a dark piece of seaweed. And it was slightly moving. So yeah, that was cool. That was only 2 weeks ago, seeing something new. And then all of these on the right hand side, which used to be Ubrancus, have now been split into the Ampharina species. So the Farani, I think, is the one that you would see the most. They're quite common, but they also come in lots and lots and lots of different colors. So they tend to have these yellow splotches on the body. Again, another technical term. Lots of splotches on the body, which helps to give them away, but you can find them, and sometimes they can be quite a deep purple color. Sometimes they're white with yellow tips, sometimes they're yellow, sometimes they're orange. So they do come in quite a broad color range of them. And then the Andra, now those ones don't tend to have the yellow spots on the body, but almost look exactly the same. And then the Liniensis down here, they again have got some splotches on the body, but they've also got white spots on the serrata, which you can see in the photos, and that is how you tell them apart. So some of them have got white spots on the serrata, the others don't. Some of them have got yellow splotches on the body, the others don't. So yeah, just very, very slight differences, but whole different species. So all of these were taken in Torbay, basically. Most of them, I think, were Beacon Cove or Babbacombe or Meadfoot. Okay, so I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that one either. Over on the left, I've only ever seen that one once, and that was on the Morris Rogue, which is submerged reef just out Meadfoot. So when you can see East Shag Rock, when you look out at Meadfoot, it's to the left of that, and it's a submerged big rock basically. And normally where it's grey, you can see the grey and the yellow, it's normally a much brighter blue, instead of it being that grey. So I'm not quite sure why it's that grey. The one next to it, again, I've only ever seen once, and that was in the shallows at Beacon. but yeah, they're quite small. So I'd say these ones were both about 10 millimeters big. I'm sure they can be a bit bigger than that. But yeah, this one, so I've just got to move my zoom thing again. The foliata, this one was really in the shallows, about literally as soon as you go in the water, it was just right there. I saw it at the end of the dive, no, not the beginning of the dive. So that's one that you might be able to see in the shallows if you're snorkeling and looking on bits of kelp. I'm sorry, I'm just needing to move this again. Oh, so I've put, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that one either, in the top right hand corner. And that one I've only ever seen once, and that was in Babacombe. I'm not really quite sure what the difference between that and the Edmondsella pedata is, because they look really similar to me. And then this is where I rely on other on who I describe as experts in the field to help with the IDs. And then in the bottom right, that one I've only just seen in the last 2 weeks again. So the first time I saw it was 2 weeks ago at Beacon Cove, and then that photo was taken with Tony at Budley last weekend. So the first time I dived there and saw that. They are absolutely tiny. So we're talking like 2 millimeters long, an absolute minuscule thing. Again, found the hydroid first, and then found some white dots on the hydroid, and it turned out to be those tiny little nudibranch, which was really quite cool. Okay, now this next group of, so I'm just going to have to move this again. So this next group are sometimes known as the side gills or bubble shells. So they do come under slugs, but they're not proper nudibranchs, if you like. So you can see at the top there, they come under a slightly different heading. It's all explained really well in some of the sources that I've used. But I thought I'd add those because some of these you would be likely to see as well. This one here on the left-hand side, the Quadrilineata, that one I've only ever seen a couple of times, and I've only seen them in Brixham, and I've only ever seen them burrowed in the sand. So that one is probably not likely to be seen in a rock pool or anything like that. I think it's only 2 or 3 times I've ever seen those. As I say, yeah, they're nearly always under the silt and under the sand. These two on the right. So I think they look really, really, really similar. And again, I need help to be able to ID them from the people who I see as experts. But again, those I've seen a lot of in Brixham, at Brixham Breakwater. To be honest, now I nearly always see the slime first and then follow the slime and then find it at the end. Okay. Oh, sorry. So the Lycia viridis, those ones are quite common. You see those quite a lot. They tend to be on the seaweed like that. I'm sure Mike can tell you the name of the seaweed a lot better. The one next to it, that the Belula, that one was floating in the water column. It was about 3 millimeters long, and this was at Fairy Cove in Paynton. And I'd never seen one of those before, and I was kind of really like admiring it on my glove, and couldn't believe it. Obviously you can't tell when you're looking at it in the water exactly what it looks like because it's so small. This is where having a camera that's able to take photos of something so minuscule is quite helpful, and then when you get home you can have a look at the details a little bit more. So when I sent that record off to Sea Search, Chris Webb, who does the Devon Sea Search, she said that there hadn't been a recorded sighting of those for something like 20 odd years or something. But last year I saw them 3 times. So I saw the first one in Fairy Cove, then I saw another one in Babbacombe, and then I saw another one at Sholston and Brixham as well. So I think they are around, but as they're so small, they may get overlooked. Then the one on the right. So I had to borrow one of Tony's pictures for this. So we were diving at Beacon Cove, and you can see the top photo is my photo, and then the really lovely photo there is Tony's photo. So we were diving, and I'd kind of waved Tony over to come and have a look at this slug, and I'd tried to take pictures of it. At the time I had a different camera, and like neither of us thought very much of it until I put the picture up on Northeast Atlantic Nudibranchs to get an ID, and it turns out that it was the first record of this species in Devon. And then I saw Tony's picture, and which I thought was unbelievably brilliant. So ordered myself the same camera as him that night, because I thought I can't have pictures like the one I've got there when I need something that's going to take a much better photo like Tony's. So yeah, instantly went out and bought that camera because it's got this really good microscopic lens on it. It's only a compact camera, but it's got this brilliant microscopic lens on it. And then you can get photos like that, which is much, much better. Okay, so over on the left over here, the punctata. So these are more commonly known as sea hares instead. Now they're normally really, really, really common. You see them a lot, especially in spring. They seem to be all over the place. But last year, I didn't see a single one in Devon, not anywhere. So I'm not quite sure why that is. And then over on the right, so these ones are the side gills nudibranch over here. Again, I've not seen those very often at all. The Bethella one in the top right-hand corner, I've only ever seen those about 3 times at Oddicombe and Babbacombe. And then the one underneath it, the Ubrancus, I've only seen those at Oddicombe and out on the Orstone, so quite a way out. Now they're quite big, so if you do see them, you'll know, or you might overlook it, not thinking it's in the nudibranch because it's so big. You know, they can be sort of, you know, this sort of size, you know, 50 mils, 50 millimeters, that sort of size. Okay, so those are the pictures that I wanted to share with you and just give you a little bit of information. There's lots of nudibranch in our waters, and what I've seen is nowhere near all of them. There are so many I haven't seen. You know, just to let you know, I didn't move any for a photo. All of them were exactly where they were found and left. The ones that I saw in the water column that were floating around, obviously I just put straight down where they were and put them on a bit of weed before leaving the water or leaving the area. And all of the photos that I've shown you there are all taken between Torquay and Plymouth. But as I said before, I have seen others in Cornwall, have seen others in Dorset, seen different colour variations of all of them. So thank you very much. And just I thought this might be useful for some people. Some really, really helpful ID sources. So I've mentioned Northeast Atlantic Nudibranchs on Facebook. That's where the people I see as experts who always give their time to help with IDs and things. I think they're brilliant, and a lot of my knowledge has come from them. Great British Marine Animals by Paul Naylor, what we all call in the diving industry the Bible. So that's got lots and lots of different species in it. The nudibranch section is quite small, but it does have some in it. Same with the Sea Search book, the edition the newer one. So the difference between the first edition and this edition is about this edition is about 3 times bigger. So the first edition was only about this size, but this has got some in it as well. That's the Paul Naylor book there, as well. And then I've got Scottish Nudibranchs. So that's by Jim Anderson and Bernard Picton, and I've got that on the Kindle. But I've also got specifically Nudibranchs of Southwest England, and that's by Dan Bolt, Terry Griffiths, and Bernard Picton, and that's on iBooks. So that's another really good ID source as well. And then the website, Habitas, which is Bernard Picton's website. So it is based in Northern Ireland, but obviously there's a lot of species there you get over here as well. And then just a very shameless advert for my own pages on Facebook with my buddy Tony. So we've got a Facebook page called South Coast Nudibranchs, and we've tried to put photos in there with the name of the species, so you can see what they look like, with how big they are, where we saw them, etc. And then we've got one for UK nudibranch reports as well, and we try to keep those up to date when we go diving, and just to keep adding things into there, basically, especially new ones that we've seen. But I think that's it.
Yes, thank you very much, Tamsyn. I was actually completely mesmerised, to be honest. But then it's hard not to be.